Greetings, my friends. David J. Coon with Qigong Awareness, the author of Qigong for Beginners, Your Path to Greater Health and Vitality. Lots of good, juicy stuff in that book. I recommend checking it out. You can look it up on the website, qigongawareness.com, or go to Lulu Books, Lulu Publishing. It's also on Amazon. All right. So today, I've had a question from someone that I think could be helpful for everyone, or at least for many people who are struggling with relationships. In this particular video, I am discussing all kinds of relationships, any kind of relationship, typically though some type of family relationship, whether that is a lover or a mother or father figure, or someone, a sister, a brother, someone that you are quote unquote close to. Where to begin? This is a tough subject, and I have compassion for those of you who are struggling in these kinds of relationships. In my life, I grew up in a dysfunctional environment. There was love there, but there was also dysfunction there. There was alcoholism there. There was drug use there, including my own, through some of the years as a teenager and so on. And a lot of dysfunctional patterns and dysfunctional behaviors. And if you're in a family where you have, in general, I'll say a lot of dysfunction, where there is harmful words being used, harmful actions, where there's love, but there's also chaos. There's maybe love, and then there's I hate you. There's I love you, and I'm going to have to beat you, or I'm going to have to leave you, or I'm going to have to victimize you to feel better, or I'm going to have to put you down in order to feel better. Unfortunately, so many of us grow up in these kinds of dynamics, and again, referencing some of the Buddhists' teachings, the Buddha's teachings, but also Buddhist teachings, and similar Eastern religious teachings, and so on. The idea of reincarnation, the idea of karma, and this idea that, for example, the late Jiddu Krishnamurti, who used to call the family, he would say that evil entity called the family. Okay, although that sounds a little more like Deepak Chopra than it does Jiddu Krishnamurti. But anyway, Jiddu Krishnamurti used to call the family the evil entity. And why would he call the family the evil entity? Well, to many Buddhist and similar like teachers, I'm going to say it like that, Eastern teachers and Eastern philosophies, the family is a dynamic that was born out of reincarnation. Most people don't know where they came from when they were born. Most people don't know where they're going. They're sort of just lost in an in-between. That in-between is also called the gap or the separation. And in Buddhist teachings, it is called the Bardo. The Bardo is the gap. It's the space in between. It's not about being in the moment. It's about living in time. It's also about living, therefore, in duality. And duality being the idea of black, white, opposites, in other words. And also time, space, and separation. You're here, I'm there, your body's over there, I'm over here, I'm separate from you. There's this idea, and you can see it in an obvious sense, of competition that happens in a soccer game. For example, to win the little trophy, we have to compete against each other, and if my team wins, we get the trophy, you know, that kind of idea. But in families and in dynamics of these kinds of relationships that I'm talking about, which sometimes we refer to as karmic relationships, there's a battle going on, and the battle is essentially for who's right. And it's also a battle of if if my family member is crazy enough, psychotic enough, insane enough, then to the ego's interpretation, okay, and this is a tall order video, okay, there's a lot of stuff in here. It may take many years to figure out what the heck I'm talking about, but hopefully this will help some of you where you are, okay. To the ego, I'm separate from you, you're separate from me, and if you're crazy, the more crazy you are, the more psychotic you are, the more effed up you are, screwed up you are, the more sane I appear to be. And if I can hold my breath and kind of step back to the side and point the finger at you, that's the double-edged sword that Jesus used to talk about, where he'd say, "Judge not, lest ye be judged." Why did Krishnamurti call the family an evil entity? Because families are unconsciously, this is the idea, families are unconsciously reincarnating with each other. And a simple way of understanding this is that like attracts like, regardless of what it appears to be or how it appears to be. Like is attracting like. Let me explain this further because it may not appear that way initially. So initially, you're born into a pond, and you and whatever fish happen to be there in that pond, okay, you're actually the same temporarily. So temporarily, you're the same because there's something that your mother hasn't healed that you still need to heal. That's why it's in your face. And there's something that your father needs to heal, or your brother or your sister need to heal. And you haven't healed it yet either. And some people in the family are very obviously screwed up. You know, I'm not trying to be judgmental. I'm just saying it in the way that the ego would say it. Okay? Some people in the family are very screwed up, apparently. It's very obvious. And other people's dysfunction is more hidden. And a lot of people, interestingly enough, who are sort of the teachers and the healers of the family, they tend to be the helpers, the counselors, the peacemakers. But initially, they don't know how to do that. So they do it in a dysfunctional way without even realizing they're doing it in a dysfunctional way. What is the dysfunctional way? They allow themselves to be victimized. They put themselves in a position to where everybody in the family needs them. They try and position themselves in a place where everybody in the family needs them, or at least one person or two people in the family need them. They try and be the more calm one. They try and, stay calm longer than maybe this other family member does. Once maybe they get sober, in other words, if the family is all addicted to drugs and alcohol, for example, and you get sober, then you seem to be the better one. And then it becomes even more obvious that the other ones are screwed up and they have problems. Anyway, those are a few hints to some of what goes on in a lot of those dysfunctional dynamics. So let me see now if I can jump to the chase with some of this in terms of what does it mean to wake up from that Maya, because it is an illusion. That means that it's a setup. It means that you are in a situation where this kind universe is letting you look at yourself in the mirror in the form of your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, etc. And this doesn't mean you should live with them ongoingly. This doesn't mean that you should communicate with them for the rest of your life. This doesn't mean that you should do everything that your mother or your father said you should do. It means trying to find your own space, your own self, your own center. And it means a deep practice of first compassion for your mother, your brother, your father, your sister. And secondly, forgiveness. Notice I said first compassion, secondly, forgiveness. True forgiveness has nothing to do with holding your breath and saying, "Oh, I forgave my family and I've moved on." That's not true forgiveness. True forgiveness is, at the end of the day, when you do enough deep work and you access the hurt within your own being. Forgiveness is when you forgive yourself for being in that relationship in the first place. You forgive yourself for being born into an environment that you don't even remember how you were born into that environment. But if you want to pass that test, I could call it a test because that's one way of thinking about it. If you pass the test, passing the test means you get to move on, you get to graduate, you get to grow up and have better relationships. So a lot of the spiritual teachings can be very confusing. So one of the things that I'd like to speak about is this idea of, because compassion is fantastic, forgiveness is fantastic, but we also need this Western psychology idea of this thing called boundaries. Boundaries to me means, setting boundaries to me means taking care of yourself. The Buddhists, once again, they have a particular way of defining harmlessness to myself, harmlessness to others. They call it ahimsa. Ahimsa means harmlessness to me, harmlessness to you. Harmlessness to me, harmlessness to you. In the early years, when I got myself sober, clean and sober from drugs and alcohol and some of the negativity that caused me to begin drugs and alcohol in the first place. And I was still in relationships with people who were still doing alcohol and or drugs, or both, whatever. And these people were people that loved me. And these were people that I loved. Yet on a certain night or a certain day of the week, oh my God, I didn't love them at all. There was like hatred and running through my veins. Some of the things that were said to me, some of the things that were said while a particular individual was drunk, intoxicated in some way, shape, or form, some of the things that were insinuated, some of the things that were said. And of course, why does this hurt so bad? In other words, when I'm 15 years old, why does it hurt so bad? It hurts so bad because these ideas have been insinuated since I was 1, 2, 3, 4. Those impressions sink deep and they hurt. But here's the thing. Jesus had an infamous line. He said, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." He reportedly said this while they were crucifying him. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Here's the thing. If your family is dysfunctional, they're insane. They're temporarily insane. If your lover is abusive, they're temporarily insane. It doesn't mean you should keep living with them. It doesn't mean you should forgive them and have them do it again tomorrow, because that would not be a practice of ahimsa, harmlessness to myself, harmlessness to you. In order to have harmlessness to myself and harmlessness to you, I might need to get a therapist. I might need to move out of the house. I might need to never see you again. And then in not seeing you ever again, I might need to practice compassion from a distance so that I can eventually get to a place of forgiveness. All right. Setting boundaries is extremely important in your life. Learning to take care of yourself. If you grew up in a family that didn't take care of you when you were growing up to the degree that you would have liked to have been taken care of and loved and cherished and all of that, then you have to find a way to do it for yourself now. And I know it seems like a very tall order, depending on, where you came from and so on and so forth. That could seem like a very tall order to have to do all that for yourself, by yourself, etc. But here's the thing. It could be done. I know, because I've done it. And if you look at the deeper spiritual teachings, the deeper spiritual teachings say that the kingdom of heaven, the source of your power, all of that, it lives within you. The teaching also goes on to say that who you are, the essence of who you are, has never been tarnished oh man, it took a lot of years to realize that my inner being remains untarnished. I had a lot of crying and cathartic and all kinds of things I had to go through to realize I felt like that hurt was so deep, right? But then when I accessed that hurt, I realized that the hurt was still on the surface. Inner being, your inner self, your inner energetic state, it's unscathed. It's not hurt. It's not wounded. It's not tarnished. It's not damaged goods. It's no longer, it's not, you know, no longer virginal. Okay? Its innocence remains there. And you only know that if you go looking for it. In many of the deeper spiritual teachings, it is said that healing is not a form of addition, it is a form of subtraction, meaning it's about undoing the knots that we have created for ourselves. And when we talk about the spiritual teachings, we're also talking about this idea of waking up, becoming aware, recognizing and realizing, for example, that I am not David the name. I am not this face. I am not this nose. I am not this hair. I am not this flesh body, except temporarily. Also, when people share with you, I use that word loosely, when they share with you a crazy idea, like you're a loser, you're so screwed up, you are the worst person, you're so stupid, all this evil crap that can come out of people's mouths, especially when they're intoxicated and everything else. Jesus's line comes in very useful in those moments. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. They're insane. Here's the thing that you may not know now that tomorrow hopefully you'll know. No one can hurt you. If you don't believe that you're stupid, somebody can sit there, lock you in a closet, and tell you you're stupid for all day long. And you're going to have compassion for them. You're going to smile at them. And you're going to be able to see, it took me a long time to be able to do this, you're going to be able to see through and beyond the mask of this evil entity, and you're going to be able to see how weak their form of attack is. And how weak, what a weakened state that they're in. What a dysfunctional, weak state they're in. And some people get the opportunity to do this when that parent, for example, that parental figure, starts withering and dying of bone cancer, for example. It happens to some individuals where literally like they're dying of some disease or old age. I mean, typically there's a cancer or something involved. And the person literally is like, the person that was so mean and aggressive and seemingly powerful, all of a sudden you look at them and they're skin and bones. And you realize there never really was any power there. It was an illusion. You made it up. And anything I can share with you in that visual, like hopefully you won't ever have to experience that yourself. But I'm just going to share that image with you, even though I know it's a tough image and it's a tough set of comments there and so on, visuals. But the thing is that parental figures and so on, people who had power over you seemingly when you were little and all of that, and maybe they still seem to have power over you, they have no power over you. And every day the power that they have over you becomes less and less and less and less. And people think they can get away with a lot of things, and I don't want to say this in a way like they're going to get theirs or something. I'm not talking like that. I'm just saying, look at yourself, because we think we can get away with certain things. In other words, we can get away with hating other people. We can get away with judging other people. We can get away with all of that, right? But really, it rots our heart and it rots our insides. And eventually it rots the body. And so bullies, whether they're a bully at school or a bully at home, whether it's a husband who's bullying his wife or a wife who's bullying the husband, whatever the scenario is, a mother that's bullying the daughter who still lives with her or lives from a distance, and the mom calls up and chastises and continues to say the same things like a robot, would just repeat the same program over and over and over and over like a broken record. Waking up is when you breathe and you sit and you watch, and you don't do anything to defend, which initially I don't recommend. I'm going to say this. I have to come back briefly. Initially, I don't recommend this. I recommend hang up the phone, set boundaries, and get some distance from those dysfunctional family members. Give yourself some space. Offer compassion at a distance. Over time, as your practice becomes greater within yourself and you become more self-accepting, it's not about whether somebody in the outside world calls me an idiot. If they do, guess what? It's because somewhere I still think I'm an idiot. And so if somebody out there calls me an idiot, I have to go home and I have to look inside myself and find where it is that I still believe I'm an idiot, because otherwise it's not going to even upset me. If somebody calls me an idiot, I just look at them and go, well, that's, in my own head, I go, well, that's kind of a temporarily idiotic statement. And this person obviously is not well, because only people who are not well say mean things to you. One of my teachers said to me 20 years ago or so, he said, start seeing them as sick. Even if you don't see that they have cancer, or you don't see that they have some physical disease that's going to kill them, or whatever the case may be currently, see them as sick, because they are. And I already had quite a bit of experience with that, and I remember him saying that, and I remember just like taking that in even further and just going like, yeah, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. They're sick. And so for me personally, without going into all the details of my personal life, but I will say a few things here, I began drawing boundaries. I began saying, I love you. I began sending a card. I began sending flowers. But I began drawing boundaries. I would no longer talk to family members while they were intoxicated. And I would tell family members straight up, I'll no longer talk to you while you're intoxicated, because you say things that you don't even remember the next day. But I remember, because it kind of hurts. And even though it doesn't have the power over me that it used to, I no longer prefer to experience that. And so in order for any of those people to maintain a relationship with me, they have to sort of clean up their act enough to be able to engage in some way, shape, or form with me, because I set those boundaries. And initially, that's very scary for the ego to set boundaries with people and to have functional relationships. And there's a lot of complicated reasons why that is. I'm not going to get into all of them here right now, because it's be too much for you, and too much to try and squeeze in just a couple more minutes here, whatever. But again, if we come back to the idea of Jiddu Krishnamurti talking about the evil entity called the family, we're talking about people who have dysfunctional karma, things that they haven't sorted out yet, various forms of greed, jealousy, anger, fear, etc. Anxiety comes from that fear and that inner identification with separation, the idea that it's you versus me, the competition, etc. And the competition for love, the competition for acceptance, all of these kinds of things. And initially, you're going to have to create some boundaries, and then you're going to have to do some deep self-introspection and look into yourself and discover that there's a part of yourself that is not hurt, not wounded, not injured. And that part of you has all the compassion in the world. That part of you has all the strength in the world. That part of you has all the invulnerability in the world. That part of you in some traditions is called the I am. When you access that part of your being, for lack of better words, that is called the I am. It is also called I have. I am and I have. I am equals I have. I am equals I have. What happens in the karmic dysfunctional relationships is you believe instead, I am not. I'm not good enough. I'm not enough. But then your mother seems to be the one that tells you that you're not enough. You're not enough. You're not enough. You never do enough. No matter what you do, it's never enough. It's never enough. And you think you're great, but you're not, because you're not enough, and you're not enough, and you're not, and you keep hearing that. When that happens, just breathe. Take it in. Maybe, again, set some boundaries. Don't listen to that too often. Get some space. Do some self-introspection and find the I am within you. Find the inner being within you. Find the space within you. And then send compassion at it from a distance to the other being. Because remember, those surface level conversations, you're not enough. Yeah, well, you did and she did and blah, blah, blah. This is all ego, okay? Everybody is telepathic. And you can communicate with everyone on a deeper level. So on a deeper level, when I would whisper to my family members, I would say, for example, your mind and mine, they're connected. I offer you love. I offer you light. I offer you joy. I offer you kind. What did you just say? Oh my God, I can't believe you said that. You see how quick you can flip out of that, go right back to ego? No. You want to stay with the practice as much as possible. I offer you love, I offer you light, I offer you joy, I offer you kindness, I offer you compassion, I offer you healing, I offer you peace. And try and sit there and pray it out, pray it out, pray it out, pray it out, pray it out. Because listen, here's my conclusion, short conclusion for now. 24 hours a day you are giving. Jesus said, for example, the Master Jesus said, as you give, so shall you receive. What a lot of people don't realize is that doesn't mean just on Sundays or on Mondays or on Tuesdays. It means every day, all the time, 24 hours a day. What are you giving? What are you giving right now? If you're judging someone else for their dysfunction, and you're judging this other fish in the same pond that you grew up in, and you're a goldfish and you're yelling at the other goldfish and you're saying, you loser, I'm only calling you a loser because you called me a loser first. Well, guess what? You're a goldfish in the same pond that you don't want to be in anymore. So if you don't want to be in that pond anymore, you literally have to have compassion and forgiveness for you, because check this out. Freud, Jesus, the Buddha, Jiddu Krishnamurti, many other teachers, spiritual teachers and gurus and masters and everything have said for centuries and longer that everybody in your life represents, guess who? They represent you. Not the highest version of you. They represent who your subconscious mind believes that you are. Wow. You might want to sit down and have a cup of tea with that comment and think about that for a few years. The people represent to your ego who it is that you think you are. But if the law is true, as I give, so shall I receive, then every act of kindness, every rose, every flower, every cup of tea, that I offer to that individual, that version of me, that sick version of me, the more I heal myself, the more I free myself. One of the things I've said to many people for many years is that, you remember, Monopoly, right? They had this little card that said, get out of jail free card. If you want to get out of the crappy job, if you want to get out of the dysfunctional family and the dynamics that are going on there, if you want to get away from dysfunctional relationships with friends or whatever, pseudo friends or whatever you got going on, you got to give the get out of jail free card. That basically means that you give compassion and you give forgiveness to individuals. And check this out. This is the hardest part for the ego. You have to let them go. There are certain people you just have to let them go. If you can't love them, then you have to let them go. And in loving them, you can still choose to have some degree of relationship with them, but in order to do that, you have to draw very, very specific boundaries, and you have to be very careful. And the one way to determine how that's going is to practice this practice of ahimsa. If I go to Thanksgiving dinner, is that going to be a practice of ahimsa, harmlessness to myself, harmlessness to my family, or am I going to freak out and lose my cookies and go off on somebody? Because if I am, then I'm going to stay home and meditate, for example, or whatever. I'm going to practice Qigong. That's a practice of ahimsa. If I can get on the phone with my mom or my dad or whoever the person is, and have a conversation because I'm in a good place, because I just practiced Qigong and meditation for the last 5 days, and I want to call for the first time in a month or whatever it is and say, I love you and just wanted to see how you're doing. And then when they start to go into their dysfunctional rant or whatever it is, depending on who the person is and, whatever the dynamic is that you might have going on. Again, I'm thinking this person in particular that I've spoken to, helping this person out a little bit, hopefully helping out some others. When that person begins to rant and so on and so forth, remind yourself they're sick, they're not well. And sometimes you can draw a boundary, right, and just leave. And then other times you have certain people in your life who maybe they're reaching the end of their life and they have some type of disease where they're losing the function of their brain or their memory, and they're being abusive. And maybe it's your elderly mom or father or grandfather. And you're their caretaker, and the person is just going crazy. And you kind of know that you have to take care of them because you're the one that needs to do that. And yet at the same time, you're having this hard time with them, attacking you. Look, nobody in their right mind attacks anybody. It's only people who are in their wrong mind, so to speak, their dysfunctional mind, who attack. If you can have compassion for that and realize that whatever they say to you, it takes time, but it's not a threat. As the Buddhists again would say, no one can make you feel anything. No one can make you feel like a loser. Look inside yourself, because under your belief that you're a loser or you're not enough or whatever the thing is, look deeper. And then a lot of people will be like, oh my God, I found a black hole and it's so empty and I'm so depressed. Man, if you could just look just a little bit beneath that, you'd realize that that was nothing but an identification with erroneous beliefs, erroneous concepts, erroneous information. And you begin to free yourself. When you begin to identify with your inner being, when you begin to identify with the I am, you also identify with I have, and you also therefore identify with, therefore I must give. I must give to you. I must give to you. I must give to you kindness. I must give to you compassion. I must give to you words of wisdom. I must give to you healing. I hope this was helpful. Until next time, thank you for tuning in.